What if the Cannibal, the great cold black dragon of Dragonstone, flew north the night Ned Stark carried Jon Snow home from Starfall? Not as a weapon, not as a mount claimed by blood or prophecy, simply because something in the child pulled at something older than any house still standing. Starfall sits where the mouth of the Torrentine opens into the summer sea, pale stone above dark water. At the hour before dawn, the torches on the walls burn low and the sea beyond them is black all the way to the horizon. A tall tower rises from the eastern wall, narrow and pale against the night sky. Ned Stark and Howland Reed ride in from the east out of the Red Mountains through the last dark of the night. Ned carries two things. In his arms, wrapped in cloth, is a boy 3 days old. Across his saddle in a plain leather scabbard is a sword that is not his. The sword is Dawn, pale as milk glass forged from the metal of a fallen star. Arthur Dayne carried it for years as the sword of the morning, the greatest knight of his age. Arthur is dead now. Ned killed him or helped to kill him, and the exact details of how it ended at the Tower of Joy are something Ned has already begun the long work of burying. Dawn had to come back to Starfall. Whatever else happened in those mountains, the sword belongs here. That part at least he can give them. The gates open. Word travels fast in Dorne, even from the Red Mountains, and Starfall already knows. They already know about Arthur. Howland Reed dismounts quietly in the yard, small, slight, a Cranogman who never looks like much until you remember he walked out of the Tower of Joy when 6 others did not. He says nothing. He has said very little since they left the mountains. He watches the castle walls and lets Ned carry the sword inside. In the great hall, Ashara Dayne is waiting. She is barely 18, with the kind of face that draws every eye in a room and the striking purple eyes of the Dayne line. She had been beautiful at the Harrenhal tourney 2 years earlier, laughing, full of light in the way young women at court sometimes are before the world takes enough from them. She's not laughing now. She stands in the center of the hall and looks at Ned and looks at the sword, and her purple eyes settle on Dawn and do not move. Ned crosses the hall and holds the sword out to her with both hands. She takes it. She holds it the way you hold something you cannot yet believe is real. The milk glass blade catches the torchlight and throws it back pale and cold. For a long moment she is perfectly still, eyes on the sword. She does not cry, she does not speak. She holds what her brother carried for years and breathes slowly, as if breathing is something she has to remind herself to do. Then she nods once. A servant steps forward and takes Dawn away. Ashara turns to face Ned. She does not ask him about Arthur. She does not ask him about the Tower of Joy or how it ended or what the last moments looked like in the Red Mountain dust. She looks instead at the bundle in his arms, at the infant he has carried all the way from the Red Mountains of Dorne, and her purple eyes go very still. "He looks like someone I knew once," she says. Ned meets her gaze. He holds his face exactly as it is, the face of a man carrying a weight he did not ask for and cannot put down. If anything lives behind that face beyond exhaustion and grief, it does not show. Ashara looks at the infant a moment longer and then looks away. She does not press him. She is Arthur Dayne's sister. She has grown up in a house full of people who know when not to ask. Later, when the household is settled, and Howland has found a corner and gone to sleep, Ned sits alone in the small room they have given him. The baby is in his arms. The infant is quiet, dark eyes open in the dark, watching nothing in particular, the way infants watch things in the hours after midnight. Ned looks at him with the same expression he has worn since the Tower of Joy. The expression of a man who has been given something he would never have asked for and cannot imagine giving back. He owes the Daynes more than Dawn can repay. Arthur Dayne was the finest knight of his generation, and Ned helped to end him in the dirt of a Dornish mountainside and walked away with his sword and a secret and a child, and none of those feel like things that balance the ledger. Dawn is back with the family. The sword at least is done. The secret he will carry alone. The secret is the boy in his arms. His name is Jon Snow, bastard of Winterfell. That is what the world is going to know and believe. What the world is not going to know is whose blood the boy carries, or what that blood means, or what Robert Baratheon would do if he ever found out. Robert has already had Rhaegar's children killed. He did not do it himself, but he gave the order and let it happen, and Ned saw the results in the Red Keep and has not forgotten what he saw. There is no version of this where the truth keeps Jon alive. There is only the lie held steady, held quiet, for as long as Ned can manage it. He and Howland have agreed to leave before first light. The longer they stay in Starfall, the more people see the child, and every pair of eyes is a risk. They will sleep a few hours and ride north with the dawn. Ned watches Jon and does not let himself think of Lyanna, because if he starts he will not stop. He thinks instead about the road, about Catelyn waiting at Winterfell with their own son, a boy born the same year as this one, and about what he is going to say when he arrives with someone else's child in his arms and no mother's name to offer her. Outside, the summer sea is black and perfectly still. The torches on Starfall's walls have burned down to embers. The The pale stone sword tower rises against the night sky, pale and quiet. Jon sleeps. End watches him in the last of the light and thinks, promise me, End. He hears it the way he heard it at the Tower of Joy, thin with blood and effort, and something fiercer than either. He carries it the way he carries the child. He is not going to put it down. Deep night at Starfall. The summer sea below is perfectly still. The pale stone sword tower rises above the outer wall of the castle with nothing but wind for company. Ashara went up after the household fell asleep, climbing the narrow stairs to the top of the tower where the sea air is cold and smells of salt, where she can look south and west over open water toward nothing in particular and think about Arthur. She has been doing this every night since the first raven came. She will probably keep doing it for a long time. She does not hear the cannibal before she sees him. There is no sound of wings, or there is a sound, but it is so low and so immense that her mind does not register it as a sound at all at first, only as a pressure in the air, a change in how the night feels against her skin. Then she looks south over the open sea and she sees him. He is impossibly large. He comes from over the water, and at first he is only a shape against the dark sky, a black absence in the stars, a piece of the night that moves differently from the rest of it. He is not flying fast. He banks in a long, slow arc over the open sea, and the moonlight catches him, and she can see the color of him fully now. Cold black, all of him, from the ridgeline of his spine to the trailing edges of his wings. Black the way deep water is black below the point where light stops reaching. His eyes are open. They are green, a burning green that does not belong in nature, and they sweep across Starfall's walls with a patience older than the castle and older than the island it sits on. She does not scream. He circles once high and slow, reading the ground below him. Then he circles again lower, and the wind from his passage is enormous, and the pale stone sword tower shudders under her palms. Then he descends and settles onto the outer wall of Starfall with a weight the stone accepts with a long grinding groan. He folds his wings. He is still. He is larger than she had imagined anything alive could be. His head turns east, toward the east wing of the castle, toward the room where the infant sleeps. Below in the yard, the horses begin to scream. End is on his feet before he is fully awake. He has not slept soundly since the Tower of Joy and probably never will again. He is through the door and into the corridor before the horses stop their first cry. Howland Reed is already there, short, slight, very still, listening. What is it? End says. He is looking at the ceiling. They go out into the yard together. The cannibal is on the outer wall above them, black and vast and absolutely motionless, folded against the dark sky like a piece of the cliff he has chosen to rest on. He is larger than the wall can properly hold, his weight spread across the battlements on both sides, and the stone beneath him is already shedding chips of mortar into the yard below. His eyes are open, green, and enormous, not looking at End, not looking at Howland or at the screaming horses, looking at the east wing, at the window of the room where Jon sleeps. End turns and walks back inside. He does not run. He walks steadily down the corridor of Starfall with a dragon on the outer wall, and he does not let himself think about what it means yet. He goes to the room and picks up the child. Jon is awake and not crying the way infants sometimes are in the dead of night, alert and still and watching things that may not be there. End carries him to the window and stands in the frame. On the outer wall, the cannibal's head turns. The green eyes find them in the window, the man and the infant. The child no larger than a bundle of cloth in the arms of a man who is standing very carefully still. And then the cannibal does something. He drops his head, not the lowering of a neck that submits to a rider. In all of recorded history, this dragon has never submitted to anyone, and this movement is nothing like that. It is slower than submission and older. It is the movement of something enormous that has recognized something it was not looking for and could not have named, the way an ancient thing recognizes a thing it did not know it was waiting for. End stands in the window for a long time. His pulse is in his throat. The child is in his arms. The dragon looks at the child, and the child's dark, unfocused eyes drift toward the window, toward the wall, toward the green glow above the way a newborn's eyes drift toward the brightest thing available. Jon reaches one small hand upward toward nothing, toward the direction of the light. End watches him do it and does not move. From the pale stone sword tower, Ashara sees all of it. She has not moved from where she stood when the dragon first came. She watched him land, and she watched the horses, and she saw the lights go on in the east wing. And now she watches the man in the window with the child in his arms, and she watches what the dragon does when it finds them. She watches the cannibal's head drop. She watches the baby's hand reach up. She is still for a long time after that, her purple eyes on the window and the wall, and she understands something she does not have a name for and would not say aloud even if she did. In another world, with no dragon and only grief and a long drop into cold water, she stands in this spot and does not go back inside. Tonight she turns from the wall and descends the stairs. In the yard below, Howland Reed has been standing the whole time watching the dragon watch the child. After a long time he says he knows the boy. End has come down from the east wing with Jon still in his arms. He stands beside Howland and does not take his eyes off the cannibal on the wall above them. He cannot know the boy, he says. The boy is 3 days old. Howland says, and yet, he does not add anything after that. The dragon is on the wall, the infant is in Ent's arms. The night around Starfall is completely quiet now, the horses stilled, the household locked behind their doors, the summer sea lying flat and dark beneath it all. And all three of them, the Cranogman and the Lord and the child, are precisely where they are, and Howland Reed does not feel any particular need to say more than he has said. In the last hour before dawn, End makes the decision. The dragon is still on the outer wall. The whole castle knows it. There are faces at every window that faces the outer wall, servants and guards and members of House Dane who have not slept and will not sleep, and who watch the black shape on the battlements the way you watch something that could kill everyone you love. End stands in the yard in the cold and looks up at the cannibal and thinks, every hour he stays here is another hour of witnesses, another hour of people who will remember what they saw and what he was carrying when the dragon came. He cannot control what they already know. He can control how much longer he gives them to look. He wakes Howland, he saddles the horses, he packs the child. Ashara finds him in the yard while the sky is still dark. It shows in the set of her face, in the way she moves, careful and deliberate, the way people move when they are holding themselves together by effort of will. She crosses the yard to End and stops in front of him and looks at Jon, at the bundle and the cloth wrap across End's chest, and leans forward slightly, close enough to see the child's face in the dark. She looks at him for a long moment. He has his father's eyes, she says. She does not name the father. End meets her gaze and says nothing at all. He holds her look the way he has learned to hold things he cannot respond to, with a stillness that gives away nothing and confirms nothing and is its own kind of answer for anyone paying close enough attention. Ashara Dane has been paying close attention her whole life. She takes a step back. Go, Lord Stark, she says. Go fast. She looks up at the outer wall, at the cannibal folded there in the dark above them, enormous and patient. She looks at the dragon for a moment and then back at End. I don't think it will follow you if you don't leave, she says. End looks at her. He thinks about what she has just said and what it means that she said it, that she has already worked out that the dragon's presence here is tied to the child's departure and not to the castle. He wants to say something to her. He wants to say her brother was the finest knight he ever faced, and the finest he ever faced was still not enough. He wants to say he is sorry in a way that would mean something. He does not say any of it. He does not have words for what he owes House Dane that would not make it worse. Thank you, he says, for Dorne. Ashara says nothing. She steps back toward the castle wall and watches them go. The gates of Starfall open before first light, and End and Howland ride north through them with the child between them. The people of the riverbank are already awake. Word of the dragon moved through the night faster than fire moves through dry grass, and by the time the gates open, the banks of the Torrentine are lined with people who have come to the water's edge to see. They do not cheer, they do not call out. They stand in their doorways and against their walls, and they watch in silence as the two riders cross the bridge with their cargo and move off the island and onto the road north. The gates of Starfall close behind them. For a time there is only the road and the sound of the horses and the sky beginning to pale in the east. The cannibal is still on the wall. End does not look back. He rides north and counts the beats of the horses' hooves against the road and thinks very deliberately about the next hour and not about anything further than that. Then the sound changes. It is the same pressure in the air that Ashara felt on the tower, the thing that comes before the sound, a change in the weight of the morning that makes both horses flinch and try to slow. End does not let them slow. He keeps them moving north and looks up. The cannibal rises from the wall of Starfall in the growing light, slow and massive, pushing upward with the unhurried patience of something that does not need to hurry. He does not circle the castle. He clears the walls and rises into the pale sky, and then he turns north. He follows at altitude high enough that from the road below he is a shadow moving across the lightning sky, a shape that could almost be a cloud, except that clouds do not move with that deliberate, steady purpose. Howland watches him for a while from horseback without saying anything. When he speaks, his voice is even. He follows us. He follows the boy, and says, that is the same thing. Not if we ride hard enough. Howland says nothing to that. They both know they cannot outride a dragon. Howland Reed has known a great many things in his life that he kept to himself, and he adds this to the list and rides. The morning opens around them, pale and cold, the Dornish landscape giving way slowly to drier road and sparse scrub and the long flat stretches that lead north out of the hot country. The dragon stays with them, not closing, not falling back, simply there above and north, a dark shape in the morning sky like the shadow of something that has already decided where it is going. Behind them at Starfall, Ashara climbs back to the top of the pale stone sword tower as the sun comes up. She stands with her hands on the stone and looks north. The dragon is already gone, already dwindling into the pale distance behind the two riders on the road, and the summer sea below the tower is bright now in the morning light and perfectly indifferent to all of it. She stands there for a long time. In another world she does not turn around. In this one she stands there long enough that the sun is fully up and the sea below catches it and Starfall casts its morning shadow east across the water. She is still standing there when the shadow moves. They ride north for days before they stop counting the days. Through southern Dorne the road is dry and pale, cut through red rock and scrub, and the sky above it is wide and clear and blue, and in that wide, clear sky there is a black shape. By day the cannibal follows at altitude high enough that from the road he could almost be a large bird, except that no bird casts a shadow that wide and no bird moves with that particular stillness, gliding on outstretched wings without a single beat, as if the act of flying requires nothing from him at all. By night he is invisible and present only as a sound, a deep and rhythmic pressure in the air that the horses feel long before any human ear can register it. The horses have stopped screaming. They have not stopped being afraid, they simply carry it now the way the two riders carry everything else. End and Howland speak less with each day on the road. There is nothing to say that has not been established. The dragon follows the boy, they cannot make it stop, they are going north. These are the facts they live inside, and saying them again does not change them. On the fourth day out of Starfall the road passes through a village of perhaps 30 houses at the edge of the dry country, a small place of whitewashed walls and goat pens and an inn with a painted sign. The villagers see the dragon before they see the riders. By the time End and Howland reach the main track through the village every door is shut, every shutter closed. The village is not empty, they can feel the watching. But no one comes out and no one calls to them and no one does anything at all except wait for the riders and their shadow to pass. At dusk the cannibal descends to the low hills west of the road and disappears into them. They can see where he has gone by the way the livestock in the farms below those hills go silent all at once, a total animal stillness that spreads across the valley like a wave. End and Howland make camp on the road and do not light a fire and listen to the dark. In the morning the dragon is back in the sky to the north of them, already at altitude, already waiting. He has not taken anything from the farms or the village. The goats are all where they were. Whatever he hunts somewhere else. The road into the reach opens up and the country becomes greener and wider and more populated, and with the population comes the news that something is wrong with the sky. They begin to encounter other travelers on the road who have heard the rumors and are looking up. It is in the reach, on a stretch of road between two market towns, that the knight finds them. He comes from the east with 3 men of his household riding hard. He spots the dragon on a hillside where the cannibal has landed to rest in the afternoon. The dragon is lying on the slope with his wings folded and his eyes half closed, and from the road he looks for a brief moment almost approachable, almost like a large animal that has found a sunny rock. The knight sees this and makes a decision that is either the bravest decision he has ever made or the stupidest, and the distance between those two things is sometimes very short. He rides toward the dragon. His men follow for about 50 yards and then stop because the men's horses will not go further. The knight's horse is still moving, barely, through what must be a combination of good training and the specific madness of a man who wants a story to tell. He gets within 20 feet of the cannibal before the dragon opens one eye fully. The cannibal raises his head. He does not roar. He does not charge or spread his wings or do any of the things a dragon in a story does when it feels threatened. He simply raises his enormous head and opens his jaw slightly, and what comes out is not quite a growl and not quite a sound at all, more a vibration in the ground and in the air and in the chest of every living thing within 100 yards. Something very old saying something very simple. The knight's horse stops. The knight stops with it. For a moment neither the man nor the dragon does anything. Then the knight turns his horse around. He rides back to his men at a walk carefully, the way a man walks away from a fire he has got too close to. And when he reaches them he keeps going and does not stop until the road has taken him around a bend and out of sight. He does not look back. He is still alive. That is the story he will tell. By nightfall they are riding again and the cannibal is in the sky above them, and End has not spoken to anyone in 4 hours. At a way station with a rookery, a small stopping place with a keeper and a cage of ravens and a single candle burning in the window, End dismounts and goes inside. The keeper looks at him and then looks at the sky and then does not look at the sky again, keeping his eyes very carefully on the floor. End sits at the table with a quill and a piece of parchment and thinks about Catelyn. She is at Winterfell with their son waiting, and she has received no word from him in weeks now, and she deserves to know he is coming home. He thinks about how to write a letter that tells her he is bringing a child and a dragon and a secret in that order of difficulty. He sits with the quill for a long time. He cannot write a word of any of it. A letter that any other eyes might read, a raven intercepted, a keeper with a good memory, one wrong sentence and the secret travels faster than he does. He puts the quill down. He goes back outside. They ride on. Few days past the way station, in a quiet stretch of road between towns where they have stopped to water the horses, End lifts Jon out of the wrap and holds him up for a moment in the open air. Jon is awake, which he often is in the midday hours, and his dark eyes are moving over End's face and then over the sky above them. The way infants look at things without focus but with a strange attentiveness, as if the shapes matter even if the detail does not. The dragon is above them, far up, a shape against the blue. Jon's eyes find him. They track upward and hold there. He reaches his small hand toward the sky. End watches him do it. He does not say anything. That evening, riding in the last of the light, Howland says without leading up to it, "When we reach the neck, I'll need to turn east." End looks at him. "Greywater watch," Howland says. "I've been away too long." End nods. He has known this was coming. Howland has his own people, his own castle, his own obligations that have been waiting since he rode south into the Red Mountains with End and 5 others who are now in cairns in Dorne. He cannot ask Howland to go further than the neck. He does not want to ask him. He simply rides and is already thinking about what the road looks like after Howland turns east, and how it will feel to be the only living person in the world who knows everything. Very alone, he suspects. It will feel very alone. Meanwhile in King's Landing the ravens are arriving. Robert Baratheon is 21 years old. He has been king for a matter of weeks. He does not look like a king yet, not the way men imagine kings. He looks like what he is, a warrior who won a war and has not had time to put down the habits of war, still moving through rooms as if he expects something to require hitting. He is powerfully built, black-haired, with the kind of physical presence that makes other men step back when he enters a space. He paces the council chambers in the Red Keep the way he used to pace before a battle, restless and impatient with stillness, and the advisors around the table have already learned to give him room. The first raven comes from the Reach. A dragon has been sighted. The message reads over the King's Road north of Old Town. A black dragon, very large. It has not attacked anything. It is following a small party of riders heading north. Robert reads it twice and says it is madness and puts it down. His advisors exchange looks and say nothing. The second raven comes 2 hours later. Same dragon, same riders. The party numbers 2 men. They came from the direction of Starfall in Dorne. The dragon has not attacked anyone. It follows at altitude and at night descends to hunt in the hills and returns to the road by morning. Robert picks up the second message and reads it and puts it next to the first and looks at them both for a moment. Then he looks up. "Who was in Dorne?" he says. No one at the table answers immediately because the answer is obvious, and saying it out loud means taking responsibility for it. End, Robert says. He does not wait for confirmation. End was in Dorne. He went after Lyanna. He rubs a hand over his face hard, the way a man does when he is not sure if he wants to think more clearly or less. Starfall is in Dorne. 2 men from Starfall riding north. Who was with him? Who was with End at the end? Someone at the table says a Cranogman. There were reports from before the Tower of Joy that the Lord of Greywater Watch rode with Stark. Howland read, Robert says. He says it the way you confirm something you already knew. He looks at the 2 messages on the table and then he looks at the ceiling and lets out a long, slow breath. It's End. It's End with a bloody dragon. Across the table, Tywin Lannister does not change his expression. He is 41 years old, Lord of Casterly Rock, the man who opened the gates of King's Landing to Robert's forces and ended Aerys's reign with the practical thoroughness of a man who understood that wars are won by the last person standing. He is still in King's Landing in these first weeks after the sack, not yet returned to the Rock, watching the new king the way a man watches a river that has changed course, assessing where the new banks are and what the new current will do. He listens to Robert say End's name and he considers it. No dragon has been ridden in 150 years, he says. His voice is level and carries no particular emotion, as if he is discussing crop yields. The last dragon in Westeros died approximately 150 years ago after the dance. If this account is accurate and the dragon has followed the same party for days without attacking and without being directed in any visible way, then it is not being ridden. Robert looks at him. Following is a choice of its own, Tywin says. A dragon following a man is not a dragon being ridden. It is a dragon choosing something. He pauses. The question of what it is choosing and why is considerably more interesting than the question of whether it is real. Robert stares at him for a moment. Then he picks up the messages and holds them and does not say what he is thinking, which is that Tywin has just said the most interesting and the most terrifying thing Robert has heard since the war ended, and Tywin said it in the same voice he would use to comment on the weather. End wouldn't tell us, Robert says, not to Tywin, to the room or to himself. Whatever this is, End wouldn't have sent a raven about it. He's been on that road for weeks and nothing has come from him. He's carrying it alone. He sets the messages down. Send a raven to every way station and city on the King's Road North. Try to reach him. He won't stop long enough to receive it probably, but try. He looks at the table. And send riders to verify. I want to know from a man on the ground, not a frightened merchant with a quill, that this is real. His council begins to move. Robert does not move with them. He stands at the table with his hands flat on it and thinks about Ned Stark, who is his oldest friend and his best friend and the man he trusts more than any living person, riding north from Dorne with something he cannot write in a letter and a dragon above him that is choosing something. I'm going to see it, he says. He says it quietly, not to anyone. If there is a dragon following one of my friends north, I am going to see it myself. No one tells him this is a bad idea. No one in that room tells Robert Baratheon anything is a bad idea this early in his reign, with the memory of what he did to Rhaegar at the Trident still fresh enough that the rubies are probably still in the river mud. Meanwhile, on the King's Road, somewhere north of the Reach, a raven reaches a way station that End passed through 3 days ago. The keeper has no way to know where the riders are now. The raven sits in its cage and waits for a reply that does not come. The cannibal follows. What runs ahead of them both, north and south, spreading the way things spread when people cannot believe what they have seen and need to tell someone. The neck is the narrowest point of the continent, a vast stretch of bog and fen and dark water where the land pinches to a corridor barely wide enough to march an army through. At that corridor's heart stands Moat Cailin. It is not much to look at. 3 towers remain of what was once something grander, and the walls between them are crumbling and patched, and the garrison is small, and the whole place smells of marsh water and old stone. But it is the only land route into the north, and it has held against every southern army that has tried to push through it for thousands of years, and that fact is worth more than stone and height and a full garrison put together. The garrison sees the cannibal before they see End. They are on the walls when the black shape crosses the sky above the causeway, blocking the afternoon light for a moment as it passes over. There is a sound from the walls, not a shout, not a command, something more involuntary than either, and then the weapons start coming down. A spear hits the causeway stones, a sword, a bow. The men follow them, not jumping, just going down the interior stairs very fast, and by the time End's horse reaches the gatehouse, the gate is open and the yard beyond it is completely empty. Every door in Moat Cailin is shut. The dragon passes overhead and keeps going north, indifferent to the fortress beneath him, and End rides through the empty gates without slowing. On the margins of the neck in the fens where the land dissolves into dark water and reed beds stretch to the horizon, the Crannig men watch. They are in their boats, a dozen of them at least, small flat-bottomed craft that sit low and still on the black water. The men in them are small and slight in the way of the Crannig men, and they watch the dragon pass over the road with the same stillness they use for everything. The stillness of people who have spent generations being very quiet in a place full of things that could kill them. They do not flee. They watch the cannibal with an expression that is not quite recognition and not quite awe, something older than both. When End passes on the causeway road, they watch him too, and one of them, an older man at the front of the nearest boat, raises one hand once in something that might be a salute or might be a farewell. They know Howland's lord is on that road. The fork where the path east toward Greywater Watch branches off the King's Road is a quiet place, just a junction in the road with a marker stone half sunk into the marshy ground. They reach it near midday and Howland brings his horse to a stop without announcing that he is stopping. He looks at Jon for a long time. The child is awake, wrapped in cloth against the cold of the neck, dark eyes open and tracking in that unfocused way. Howland watches him with an expression End cannot fully read, the expression of a man turning something over in his mind that he has been carrying for a long time. Then he looks up at the sky. The cannibal is circling above them, wide and slow, a dark shape against the gray overcast of the north's edge. Howland watches the dragon. The dragon does not look at him. Keep the boy warm, End, Howland says. He's all you have left of her. End says nothing. There is nothing to say that Howland does not already know. In whatever comes after, Howland says, remember this, I was there, I know what I saw. He does not explain what he means by whatever comes after. He is a Crannogman. His people keep their knowledge the way they keep their waters, quiet and deep and accessible only to those who know where to look. He does not look back. In a few moments the road and the reeds have swallowed him, and End is alone with the child and the dragon for the first time since they left the Red Mountains of Dorne. The King's Road stretches north ahead of him into the grey country toward Winterfell. He rides. For the first time since the Tower of Joy there is no one riding beside him who knows the truth. Howland knew all of it, every part, from Lyanna's last words to the exact weight of the promise End is carrying. And now Howland is gone east into the fens and will not come out again in this life if he can help it. The secret is entirely End's now. He is alone. He rides with Jon against his chest and the cannibal above him and the secret inside him and the road in front of him, and the north opens up around him, cold and wide and his. Meanwhile, at Winterfell, Catelyn Stark is reading a raven. She is 19 years old, auburn-haired and blue-eyed, and she is sitting in the solar of the great keep with their son Robb in the crook of her arm. Robb is newly born, small and pink, and currently asleep in the way newborns sleep, absolutely and completely as if sleep is work. She holds him with the ease of a woman who has already decided she is going to be good at this, and with her right hand she is unrolling a message that arrived an hour ago from a merchant in the Reach who apparently felt compelled to write to every lord's house he could think of. The message describes a dragon. Catelyn reads it once and then reads it again more slowly. She has heard stories of dragons her whole life, the great Targaryen beasts of the conquest, Balerion the Black Dread who could swallow a mammoth whole, the horror of the dance of the dragons and the beasts that tore each other apart above Dragonstone. These are stories. Dragons have been gone from the world for 150 years, and before this moment Catelyn Stark would have told you with perfect confidence that she had no expectation of ever encountering one in any form except a story or a tapestry. The merchant says cold black, very large, following a small party north on the King's Road. The party numbered 2 riders. One carried an infant. Catelyn goes very still. She looks at Robb in her arm. He breathes steadily, unknowing, pink and perfect. Then she looks at the message again. 2 riders from the direction of Dorne, one carrying an infant. She had heard a rumor weeks ago, a fragment carried north by a returning soldier who had seen something in the Reach and could not say exactly what. She had hoped it was nothing. She had held Robb and hoped very hard that it was nothing, that the rumor was wrong or confused or aimed at the wrong lord, that End was coming home alone with his grief and his honor and nothing else. She sits with the message for a long time. The fire in the solar is burning well and the room is warm and Robb sleeps in her arm and the words on the parchment do not change. Then she folds the raven carefully and holds it over the fire and lets it catch and watches it burn until there is nothing left. Winterfell rises out of the gray northern landscape the way it has always risen, massive and familiar and cold. The twin curtain walls dark with old rain, the towers and keeps beyond them breathing the white steam of the hot springs that run beneath the castle like slow underground rivers. Even in autumn the steam rises. It is one of the things about Winterfell that has always felt alive to End, the way the castle breathes, regardless of season, regardless of what has happened outside its walls or what is about to happen. The breath of old stone and deep water that never stops. He rides through the outer gate and into the inner yard and the household is there, stewards and guards and servants who have been waiting and watching the sky for days now. Catelyn stands on the steps of the great keep with Robb in her arms. She looks at End. She looks at the bundle against his chest. She does not look at the sky, not yet. Her face is carefully controlled, the face of a woman who has decided she will not make a scene in the yard in front of the household, no matter what is about to happen. End dismounts. He does not go to her immediately. He looks up. The cannibal is circling Winterfell wide and slow and End watches him from the yard and watches where he looks. The dragon's gaze is not on the keep or the towers or any of the places a person might expect. It is on the northwest corner of the inner yard where the stone arch descends into the earth, where the darkness below the arch is older than the castle above it, the entrance to the crypts. The cannibal circles at once at medium height, then lower, tighter. His wings cut the air close enough now that the household presses back against the walls and someone near End makes a sound that is trying not to be a scream. The dragon circles again, lower still, and then drops. He does not crash. He lands with a precision that should not be possible for something that large, his claws finding the stone of the low roof above the crypt entrance and gripping it. The roof groans under his weight but holds. The cannibal folds his wings, green eyes cold black in the gray northern light. He is still. He lies across the crypt entrance the way the stone direwolves inside the crypts lie at the feet of the kings buried there, patient and immovable, keeping something. For a moment no one in the yard moves or speaks. Then Catelyn says from the steps of the great keep, her voice level and carefully controlled, "Why does it not leave?" "I don't know," End says. He is lying. He has an idea, a thought he has been refusing to complete for weeks now, and he looks at Jon in the wet nurse's arms and then at the dragon on the roof above the crypts, and he refuses it again. He does not follow that thought to where it leads. He cannot afford to think about what it means. He can only keep moving forward one step at a time, the lie in front of him like a road, and he walks it. He turns to the steward of Winterfell, a careful man who has run the castle since En's father died and who has the quality all good stewards have of appearing to be waiting for the next instruction. My sister's body was brought north, En says. She needs to be laid to rest. A place has been prepared for her in the crypts. He looks at the cannibal on the roof above the entrance, at the black mass of him settled over the stone arch like a lid over something. When the time is right, he says, I'll take her down myself. The steward nods. He does not ask about the dragon. He will need to instruct the household. He is already thinking about how to do it. Above them, the cannibal's green eyes move slowly across the yard, across the household and the wet nurse and the infant, and then settle north toward the hills beyond Winterfell's walls, toward whatever lies that way. The steam of his breath rises and mingles with the steam of the hot springs, and for a moment they are the same thing, Winterfell's breath and the dragon's breath together, rising in the cold northern air. 2 days pass and the cannibal does not leave. He sleeps on the roof above the crypt entrance in the long still hours before dawn, black and motionless. In the daylight hours he lies in the same place and watches the yard with his green eyes half open and does not trouble himself to move. He does not eat from Winterfell's stores. Whatever he hunts far enough out that no one sees it, and he is back on the roof by the time the castle wakes. He is becoming in the way that large and dangerous things sometimes do when they stay long enough in one place, a fact of the castle, not safe, not tame, a fact. The household learns to live around him. The horses are moved to the far stable. The guards change their patrol routes so that the northwestern corner of the inner yard is approached only for necessary work, and that work is done quickly. The servants with rooms facing that side of the yard develop the habit of not looking out their windows first thing in the morning, because the dragon's head is often turned toward the east wing, and meeting those green eyes across a yard at dawn is not something anyone wants to start the day with. Jon's crib has been placed in a room off the main corridor of the Great Keep, as far from the crypt entrance as the castle's geography permits. Catelyn arranged it without saying anything explicit about why. She knows what she is doing and she does not explain it. But she notices, and she does not say this either, not to End, not to anyone, that the dragon's head is almost always facing the east wing. That when the wet nurse carries Jon through the yard on the warmest part of the afternoon, the cannibal's head tracks the movement from the roof, the way a hunting cat tracks a mouse across a floor, slow and entirely without effort, simply always knowing where the thing is. She notices this and she says nothing, and she adds it to everything else she is carrying in silence, which is becoming a considerable weight. On the third day, En takes a torch and goes down into the crypts. He goes alone. He tells no one where he is going, and the cannibal on the roof raises his head as En pulls back the stone gate at the top of the stairs but does not move otherwise. En descends. The air changes immediately on the stairs. It becomes colder and older, carrying the smell of deep stone and the dry cold of a place where seasons do not reach, and the darkness ahead of the torchlight is absolute. The stairs go down one level and then another, cutting into the bedrock of the hill beneath Winterfell, and with each level the ceiling lowers and the passage narrows and the silence deepens. The kind of silence that is not the absence of sound but the presence of something older than sound. 8,000 years of Stark kings in the stone around him. Each lord has his tomb. Stone effigies carved in the likeness of the men lie on their shelves in the rock with their hands crossed and their eyes open. At the feet of each lord a great stone direwolf lies curled, worn smooth by centuries of cold air and the occasional hand that has reached out to touch it. Across each lord's lap an iron sword, laid there by tradition to keep the spirits at rest within the stone. Some of the swords are rusted to a deep orange-brown, some have been replaced when the old ones crumbled. The tradition is older than anyone can trace, but no one has ever questioned it. The Starks do not question the things the crypts require. He passes the ancient kings in the upper levels, Edric Snowbeard, his face worn to a blur by centuries of cold air, Brandon the shipwright whose effigy looks west even in the tomb, Theon Stark the hungry wolf broad-shouldered even in stone. Others going back into the deeper dark, faces growing more abstract with age, more like the idea of faces than faces themselves. He reaches the newer section. Lord Rickard Stark's tomb is there in the upper level where the newer dead are kept. There is no body. Aerys burned En's father alive in his own armor in the throne room of the Red Keep, burned him while Brandon stood strangled by a device of Aerys' own design, watching and unable to cry out. They had brought the armor home, what was left of it, and sealed it in the tomb with the stone image of the man carved from memory above it. It looks like En's father. It also does not, because no carving made from memory ever looks quite right. En kneels. He stays there for a moment with the torch behind him and the cold air moving against his face from the deeper levels, and he says, "I brought her home, father, she'll be here soon." A pause. "And I brought something else, something I did not ask for and cannot give back." He is not sure exactly who he is explaining this to, his father himself, the stone above him. Through the roof of the crypts, through the flagstones of the inner yard and the stone arch and the low roof above it, the cannibal shifts his weight. It is a small movement, barely anything, but the sound of it carries down through the rock, a low settling pressure, and the ceiling of the crypt trembles very slightly and a fine dust falls from the joins in the stone. End looks up at the ceiling for a moment, then he gets to his feet. Brandon's tomb is next to their father's, carved with the face of a man who died furious and never had the chance to become anything else. Brandon, who should have been Lord, who rode to King's Landing with a sword and an ultimatum and no plan beyond his own rage, and whose death set everything else in motion, ence war, ence lordship, ence promise in a tower room in Dorne. End puts his hand flat on the carved face. He does not speak. There is nothing to say to Brandon that would make any of it better. He keeps his hand there for a moment and then he takes it away. The alcove for Lyanna is at the end of the row. It is a cold niche in the rock, a shelf cut into the stone at the right height for a figure to lie on, and her effigy is not there yet because the stone cutters have not finished it. The niche is empty. The wall above it is bare. There is a bracket for a torch already set into the stone. End sets his torch in it and stands back and looks at the empty shelf in the light. He stands there for a long time. She is not finished, he thinks. She died, yes, and her body will lie in this shelf soon, but she is not finished because Jon is alive. Every day Jon is alive, Lyanna is not finished. The promise End keeps is the thing she asked him to keep, and as long as he keeps it, she is still in that tower room asking him to hold. Above him, through all that stone, there is a slow and steady weight, not a sound exactly. The dragon's breath. The dragon's mass, patient and still on the roof above the crypt entrance, keeping its own kind of watch over the space below. End can feel it the way you feel a large animal in the dark before you can see it, the displacement of the air, the sense of something alive and enormous above and around you. He reaches out and touches the empty shelf where Lyanna will rest. He says, "Soon." Then he picks up his torch and climbs back toward the light. The third night after Ent's return to Winterfell, he cannot sleep. He gets up after a long time lying awake, pulls on his clothes in the dark and goes to the room where Jon is sleeping. The wet nurse is dozing in her chair. Jon is awake and quiet, his dark eyes open and moving over the shadows of the ceiling with that strange infant attention, the looking that does not focus on anything and yet seems to find things. End lifts him out of the crib carefully and carries him into the corridor. Lyanna should know her son is home. He has been thinking this since the night he stood at her empty alcove and said soon. This is the soon he promised. The child is home. He should bring them together even if she is stone and cold and not there to know it. He crosses the yard with Jon against his chest. The night is overcast, no moon, and the yard is very dark, and the cannibal on the roof above the crypt entrance is invisible in the darkness, only a shape where the faint light from the castle windows does not reach. End does not look at him directly. He crosses to the stone arch and pulls it open and takes his torch from the bracket beside it and goes down. The stairs descend into cold. Jon looks up at the torchlight with his dark eyes, at the way it throws shadows across the stone ceiling and walls, the shifting shapes of the flame and the dark in patterns that change with every step. He does not cry. He has not cried much in his short life, this infant, and End has stopped expecting it. He is a quiet child in a way that is not passivity but something closer to watchfulness, an alertness that sits behind those dark eyes and watches without yet having names for anything it sees. End talks to him as they descend, not explaining anything, just talking quietly the way a man talks to an infant when he has no one else to speak to. He talks about Lyanna, about her hair which was dark like his, and the way she rode which was too fast and drove their father to despair, about the wild quality she had, the thing that made her impossible to hold in any shape other than the one she chose. They reach the bottom of the stairs. End carries Jon to Lyanna's alcove. The torchlight falls ahead of them down the corridor, across the stone effigies of the Stark lords in their niches, across the stone direwolves at their feet and the iron swords across their laps. He kneels before his sister's alcove and holds Jon up so the light falls on the infant's face, on the dark eyes and the stark look of him, and he says, "She would have loved you. She would have been so angry at everything I've done to keep you safe, and she would have loved you anyway." He sets Jon on the empty stone shelf carefully for just a moment, and the infant lies there in the cold alcove where Lyanna's effigy will one day lie, looking up at the ceiling with his dark eyes, and the torch burns and the crypt is quiet and nothing moves. "Promise kept," Lyanna says. Then above them the stone moves. It is not a sound at first. It is the same pressure Ashara felt on the tower at Starfall, the change in air, the sense of enormous weight redistributing itself. Then it becomes a sound, a deep grinding movement of stone against stone and the creak of timbers under a load they were not designed for. End picks Jon up from the shelf and turns toward the stairway with the torch raised. Something is in the yard above them. He can hear it even underground. The way the flagstones of the yard carry the vibration of the cannibal's movement, the enormous shifting of his weight from the roof to the ground, the slow crossing of the yard. End climbs the stairs quickly with Jon held close. He is halfway up when the gate at the top of the stairs moves. It is a narrow stone arch with a heavy gate that can only be opened from inside or from the yard above, and the gate is being pushed, not kicked, not battered. Pushed slowly by something applying an enormous and patient pressure to it from outside, and the old iron hinges protest the pressure with a sound like a bell being rung underwater, low and resonant and traveling down through the stone around them. The gate opens, the eye fills the arch, one eye. It is larger than the gate itself, not fitting within the arch but pressing against the edge of it from outside, and it is green the way fire is sometimes green at its hottest point, and it is looking down the stairs, looking at them. At End holding Jon at the midpoint of the stairway, torch raised, the child in his arms looking up. The cannibal is too large to enter. His eye is as large as the gate and his head is larger than the entire arch, and the stone of the crypts is ancient and thick and immovable, and he cannot get further in than this. He presses his eye to the opening and he is still. End looks up at the eye. Jon looks up at the same thing. The infant does not cry. He does not flinch or turn away. He looks at the green eye above them with the same quiet watchfulness he turns on everything, and then he reaches his small hand toward the top of the stairs, toward the gap and the light above, the way he reaches toward the sky when the dragon passes overhead on the road. For a long time nothing moves. The cannibal holds perfectly still. He does not press further. He does not try to force the arch open wider or bring more of himself through the opening. He looks steadily at the child at the bottom of the stairs in the tomb of the Stark kings, and the child looks back, and the torch between them burns, and the ancient faces of the Stark lords line the corridor below, and the whole underground is absolutely quiet. Then the eye withdraws, the gate falls back into its frame. The grinding of the cannibal's movement returns, crossing the yard above them slower than before. End climbs the remaining stairs and eases the gate open and comes out into the yard with Jon in his arms. The cannibal circles the crypt entrance, one slow pass around the stone arch, his footsteps heavy and deliberate on the flagstones. Then he stops. He turns once more to face the arch, and then he lies down across it, not blocking it in anger or warning. He does not face the yard or the castle or anything that moves. He simply lies down across the stone arch and folds his head against his chest and closes his eyes, and the weight of him settles over the crypt entrance the way the carved stone direwolves lie at the feet of the kings below, patient and permanent, keeping something. End stands in the yard and looks at him for a long time. Then he says, "You're not a writer, you never were, I don't know what you are." The cannibal opens one eye. It is green and vast and absolutely steady, and it looks at End for a moment, and then it looks north, past the walls of Winterfell, past the hills beyond, toward whatever lies out there in the dark that requires watching. It does not look at Jon. It looks north, then it closes again. 3 weeks after Ent's return to Winterfell, Robert Baratheon rides through the gates. He sent no raven. Whatever is happening at Winterfell with a dragon and a bastard child, Robert wants to see it exactly as it is, not as End has had time to arrange it. He owes End a great many things, including his throne, but he does not. He rides through the gates of Winterfell and into the inner yard, and he pulls his horse up and he sees the cannibal. He has heard about the dragon for weeks from ravens and from riders, and from the Knight of the Reach who came personally to King's Landing to describe the experience in a voice that had not fully stopped shaking. He thought he had prepared himself for what he was going to see. He has not. No description prepares you for the scale of it. For the way the black mass of the cannibal draped over the stone arch of the crypt entrance fills a space that the eye keeps trying to make smaller and failing. Cold black. Still. Green eyes open in the gray northern light, watching the gate, watching him. Robert's horse shies and he holds it with his knees and does not let it turn. He's 21 years old and he has just won a war, and he killed Rhaegar Targaryen himself with a warhammer at the Ruby Ford and led the charge across a river against a force that outnumbered them, and he is not a man who frightens easily. He sits his horse and looks at the dragon, and the dragon looks at him, and the yard is absolutely silent. End has come out of the great keep. He is crossing the yard toward Robert, moving carefully. "Is it tame?" Robert says. "No," End says. "Then why is it here?" "I don't know," End says. "It is the truth." Robert hears it as the truth in the exact tone of voice that End uses when he is being honest and not when he is being careful, and something about that lands differently than Robert expected. He had expected End to be careful. He had been preparing himself for careful cough. End is looking at the dragon the same way Robert is looking at the dragon, which is to say with complete attention and very little apparent understanding. And that is either exactly what it appears to be or a deception Robert cannot detect. He slides off his horse. He hands the reins to one of his men and he starts walking toward the dragon slowly, the way you approach something large and dangerous that you have not yet established an understanding with. Feet flat, no sudden movements, weight forward but not rushing. His men do not follow. His men are doing the thing that men do when they think something very stupid and very brave is about to happen, which is standing very still and hoping it resolves itself. He gets within 10 feet of the cannibal. The dragon has not moved. Its green eyes have tracked Robert's approach the entire way, not with alarm, with something that looks more like assessment, the particular attention of something deciding whether what is approaching constitutes a disturbance. Robert reaches out his hand slowly, fingers open, palm up, the way you offer your hand to any large animal you want to convince you are not a threat. The cannibal bears one tooth, not a charge. One tooth visible at the edge of the jaw, white and enormous, a single specific statement. Robert looks at the tooth for a long moment, then he pulls his hand back. He nods once as if the dragon has said something reasonable that he is inclined to agree with. He turns around and walks back to End. "All right," he says. That is all he says about it. Inside, Catelyn brings Jon in because End asks her to, and because she is Catelyn Stark and she does what is necessary regardless of what she thinks of it. She hands the infant to Robert without a word. He is 21 years old and has no children of his own. Lyanna Stark, who is going to be his queen, died 3 weeks ago in a tower in Dorne. This is her brother's house, and there is a dragon in the yard. And this child, this bastard child of End's, whose mother no one will name, is looking up at him with dark eyes and the general expression of profound uninterest that infants have for everything. Something moves across Robert's face. It is grief and it is bewilderment and it is something else that he does not have a name for, some feeling that arrives unexpectedly and sits behind his eyes for a moment, and then he pushes past it the way he pushes past most things, forward, always forward. "Fine-looking boy," he says. He does not ask about the mother. He hands Jon back to Catelyn and picks up his wine. That night, with the household dismissed and the great hall quiet and the fire burning low, End and Robert drink the way they used to drink before the war, side by side, not looking at each other, saying more in the silences than in the words. Robert says, "The dragon follows the boy." He says it the way he says things when he already knows the answer and is giving the other person the chance to offer it first. End says nothing. He looks at his wine. "I've been told," Robert says, "that it follows the boy wherever he goes, that it faces the room where the boy sleeps." He drinks. "Tell me it means nothing, End. Tell me it means nothing and I'll believe you." End looks at his wine for a long time. "It means something," he says. "I don't yet know what." He will not lie that far. He cannot tell Robert what the dragon is or what it knows or what it recognized in the arch of the crypts 3 nights ago when it pressed its eye to the gate and looked at the child lying in the alcove where the Lord of Winterfell's sister will one day rest. But he will not tell Robert it means nothing because it does not mean nothing, and some lies are not worth the cost even when the truth is worse. Robert drinks and does not push. He sits with it the way he sits with things he has decided not to settle tonight. In the morning, Robert is in the yard before End. He has sent his guards away and he stands alone in the yard with the cannibal on the crypt entrance, and the two of them watch each other. Neither moves. It is cold and overcast and the yard is empty except for these 2 large, dangerous things standing a polite distance apart and regarding each other with equal steadiness. Robert has his arms crossed and his feet planted, and the dragon has his green eyes half open, and neither of them appears to feel any particular need to resolve the situation. Then End comes out of the great keep with Jon in his arms. The cannibal's head swings not at Robert, not at End. At Jon, immediately, the way a compass needle swings to north without any choice in the matter, simply the way the thing works. The great black head turns and the green eyes settle and the dragon is looking at the child and nothing else. Robert sees it. He stands very still and he watches the dragon's head track the infant and he does not look away. His face is unreadable in the morning gray, the face of a man putting information together that he has not yet decided what to do with. He stands there for a long time, then he turns and goes back inside to eat. He says nothing about it, but Robert Baratheon does not forget things. The morning of Robert's second full day at Winterfell, he comes to the yard early. He is dressed simply, without ceremony, no crown and no retinue. Just a man in riding clothes standing in the gray light of a northern morning with his arms at his sides. The cannibal is on the crypt entrance behind him, awake and still, green eyes open. Robert does not look at the dragon. He waits for End. When End comes out into the yard, Robert does not greet him. There is no good morning and no comment on the weather and no preamble of any kind. They have known each other too long for Robert to bother with the approach when he has already decided to make the crossing. And Robert says, "Whose son is he?" He says it without the rising pitch of a question. It is a statement with a gap in it where the answer goes, and Robert is standing very still and looking at End with the expression he gets when he has finished thinking about something and arrived somewhere he does not like, and is being honest about it anyway. End does not answer immediately. He is Eddard Stark, and Eddard Stark does not rush to fill silences, especially silences that are trying to pull something out of him. He stands in the yard in the gray morning and he looks at Robert and he takes the measure of what is being asked and what it will cost to answer it one way or the other. He takes his time. Robert waits. The cannibal is still behind them and the yard is empty of anyone except the two men and the dragon. Then End says, "He is my son, I will not say otherwise." He says it clearly and without flinching, and he meets Robert's eyes and holds them and does not add anything at all. Not an explanation, not an apology, not a name. The lie held perfectly still, the way you hold a line against a current, both hands on it, leaning back, not letting it move. Robert looks at him for a long time. Then behind them both the cannibal rises. He does not charge or spread his wings or do anything that looks like threat. He simply stands up, all that black mass coming upright in the gray morning light, those green eyes lifting above the level of the crypt entrance and finding the yard. A serving girl is crossing the far side of the yard with Jon in her arms, making the morning circuit from the great keep to the kitchens. The cannibal's head turns to her, turns to Jon, and then the dragon is tracking the child across the yard the way he always tracks the child. The compass needles swing, the complete and involuntary reorientation of all that attention from everything else to the boy. And when the girl changes direction, the dragon's head moves with her. Robert watches this. He watches it the way he watched it yesterday morning when the same thing happened and he went inside without speaking. But yesterday was yesterday. Today he is standing in the yard and he is watching the dragon follow the infant with its gaze, and his face is doing something complicated, something that Robert Baratheon does not usually permit his face to do, and he lets it happen. He is quiet for a long time. Then he says, "The dragon stays here." End waits. "It doesn't come south," Robert says. "It doesn't leave this castle if it'll keep to that." A pause. He is still watching the dragon, not End, as if he needs to look at the dragon to say the next thing. The boy is Ned Stark's son, that is what I will say." He turns his head finally and looks at End. "That is what everyone will say." End says nothing. "I'm not doing this for him," Robert says. His voice is flat and curt. "I want you to know that I'm not doing this because I feel any particular way about." He stops. He does not finish the sentence. There is a name in the gap at the end of it that he will not say, in the same way there is a name in the gap in his original question that End will not say. And between the two of them, the name that cannot be said hangs in the morning air like smoke. "I'm doing it because I loved her too," Robert says, "and because you are the only man I trust in this world." He crosses the yard to End and grips his shoulder once hard, the grip of a man who is saying something his voice cannot carry alone. Then he releases and steps back. "The dragon watches north," he says. "I've seen it 3 times yesterday and once already this morning. You see it too." "Yes," End says. "Something is watching back," Robert says. It is not a question either. He says it the way a man who has led armies says things he does not have an answer for plainly without dressing it up. Then he turns and walks back toward the great keep, and that is the end of it, the whole of what Robert Baratheon is prepared to give. And for End it is enough and more than he has any right to expect. Robert leaves Winterfell that afternoon with his party, moving fast the way Robert always moves when he has made a decision, and the decision is behind him and the road is ahead. End stands in the yard and watches him go, watches the party ride through the inner gate and then the outer gate, and he watches the outer gate begin to close behind the last of Robert's men. At the last moment before the gate shuts, Robert turns his horse. He looks back into the yard, not at End. At the dragon on the crypt entrance, at the black mass of the cannibal lying there in the gray afternoon light. He looks at the dragon for a long moment, and something moves across his face in that moment. Something that does not quite have a name. Something between the grief he has for Lyanna and the fury he has for everything Targaryen, and the love he has for Ned Stark and the fear that a man who is not afraid of very much still feels when he looks at something dense and vast, and committed to something he does not understand. Then he turns his horse and rides south, and the gate closes behind him. The dust of his passage settles on the road. The cannibal watches it settle. His green eyes follow the diminishing sound of the horses on the road south until there is no sound left. And then he is still again, covering the crypt entrance the way he has covered it since the night he pressed his eye to the gate and looked down the stairs at the child in the dark. He breathes. The yard is quiet. Then his gaze moves north past the walls of Winterfell, past the towers and the hills and the gray line of the horizon. The same direction he looked at the top of the stairs and the crypts. The same direction his eye went after End said, "You are not a rider, I don't know what you are." North, where the cold comes from. North, where what is always coming is still out there, patient in its own way, waiting in the dark the way the cannibal waits in the light, as if patience is something the old things understand that the young things have not yet learned. He does not look back. In the weeks after Robert rides south, the North adjusts. The cannibal stays. He hunts in the hills beyond the castle each night and is back on the roof above the crypt entrance before the castle wakes, and he does not take from Winterfell's stores or touch the Stark livestock, and the household learns to live around him the way they have learned to live around every other permanent and unasked for thing, which is by incorporating him into the shape of the day until he becomes part of it. The grooms know which stable the horses prefer now. The guards know which patrol routes keep the most distance from the northwest corner. The kitchen staff know that the shadow crossing the high window in the late afternoon is the dragon returning from the hills and not a storm coming in. The North's bannermen begin to arrive, a slow procession over the weeks, some with legitimate business for their lord and some who have no business at Winterfell at all, except that a dragon has come to Winterfell and they need to see it with their own eyes. They ride in carefully, these northern lords and their men, and they stand in the yard and look at the cannibal, and the cannibal looks back at them, and they leave without drawing swords. Meanwhile, in the rooms of the great keep, Catelyn Stark nurses Robb by firelight. Jon's crib has been moved to the far wall of the room, the farthest point from the window, from the yard, from the side of the castle where the cannibal lies. She did not ask for this. It simply happened the way things happen in a household when the mood of the house is clear enough that instructions become unnecessary. She has not commented on it. She holds Robb in the firelight and she looks at Jon sleeping in the crib across the room, and she feels the feeling she always feels when she looks at him, the cold one without a name. The one she will not speak and cannot stop. The dragon's shadow crosses the high window. She looks up. When she looks back down, Jon is awake. He is not looking at the ceiling or at her. He is looking at the window, at the place where the shadow was. His dark eyes fixed on that square of light with the particular stillness he has that is not passivity but something that looks in an infant almost like waiting. She looks at the window. She looks at the child. She says nothing. She holds Robb closer and watches the fire. Ned seals Lyanna's tomb on a gray afternoon when the yard is quiet. He does it himself with two of the castle's men to help with the stone lid, and no ceremony except his presence. The effigy is finished. The stonecutters did good work, and the face that looks up from the carved stone is close enough to the one Ned carries in his memory that it costs him something to look at it directly. He does not look at it for long. He slides the lid into place. Then he lays the sword. He chose it from the weapons of the Tower of Joy. Dead sorted through them after they brought everything north, and the sword he chose is a Kingsguard sword, the kind made for the order with a white hilt and a straight blade. Something from that moment. Something that was there when Jon was born and Lyanna died and the promise was made. He lays it across the stone of her effigy's lap, the blade flat, the tradition honored, the old compact between the Stark dead and the iron that keeps them resting. He puts his hand on the stone lid, then he takes his hand away and comes back up into the light. On a mild afternoon a few days later, Ned carries Jon into the yard for the first time in full daylight. He has been kept inside in the rooms of the great keep since they arrived at Winterfell. The wet nurse, and the indoor hours and Catelyn's arrangements keeping the child from the yard and the cold and the dragon's direct attention. But the weather has turned mild for a few days, the kind of brief northern warmth that comes before winter properly closes, and Ned carries Jon out into the yard in the afternoon light. The cannibal raises his head. He does not stand or leave the crypt entrance. He simply raises his head and his green eyes open fully, and he watches. Ned stands in the center of the yard with Jon in his arms, and the household watches from doorways and windows, breath held, the breath of people who have been living near something dangerous long enough to know how fast it can change. Jon's dark eyes find the dragon immediately, not the walls or the sky or Ned's face, the black shape across the yard. The green eyes above the stone arch. Jon finds it the way he always finds it, without searching. As if the finding is not something he does but something that happens, a reorientation as natural and involuntary as the cannibal's head turning to follow him. He reaches his hand toward the dragon, small fingers open, reaching. The cannibal blinks one slow blink, both eyes at once, and then the green gaze is steady again. Nobody in any doorway moves. The moment holds, and then it passes, and Ned turns and carries Jon back inside, and the servants release the breath they have been holding, and the yard goes on. In the castle records, in the letters that go south to the citadel and come back with questions that cannot be answered, in the ravens that carry fragments of it across the north until the whole of the north knows the shape of the thing, no one will have a word for it. The last dragon died over 130 years ago. This one came back. It came to Winterfell, and it lies on the tomb of the Stark kings of winter, and it watches the north. The record that will outlast all of them will say only, a dragon has come to Winterfell. It does not leave. The last evening before the cold truly comes, Ned stands in the yard alone. The wind is out of the north, carrying the smell of ice and distance, the smell that the north always has when winter stops being a season and starts being a fact. The cannibal's eyes are open, green in the dimming light, fixed on the north horizon, past the walls, past the hills, past anything that can be seen from here. He breathes. The steam of his breath rises in the cold air. And speaks to no one in particular, to the yard, to the castle, to the dragon, to the stone lid over Lyanna's face, to the boy in the rooms above, to everything that has happened and everything that is still to come. The cannibal does not move. He does not turn his head or acknowledge the words or do anything at all except continue to look north with those green eyes, steady and patient and old beyond anything End has words for. He was ancient before the dance of the dragons. He was ancient before the Targaryens came to Westeros. He has watched kingdoms rise and fall, and he is watching now. And whatever is coming from the north, he has been watching it longer than the Starks have been saying those words, and he knows more about patience than End ever will. The wind comes south, the dragon breathes. That's the theory. Westeros is full of stories that never quite settled into the official record, and this is one of them. If you want to keep walking these roads with us through the crypts and the long nights and the quiet places where the old things still wait, then stay with the channel. There's more of the map left to cover.